Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to talk about my appearance on Games with Dave. We're going to take a look at a couple of articles published on EN World, taking a look at the Forge of the Artificer product from Wizards of the Coast. EN World has its most anticipated RPGs of 2026 nominations going on right now. We'll talk about that. Today's big commentary is A Tale of Two Session Zeros. I had the opportunity to not have just one, but two Session Zeros in the same week, which I don't recommend, but I did it. So we're going to talk about those two Session Zeros and what I learned from each of those games. Today's GM tip is going to be Starting Campaigns Part 2. Last week I did Part 1, and today we're going to dive in more with Part 2, and we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. Right now on Sly Flourish, we are having a sale. Right now, until December 17th, 2025, you can get 20% off of all books on the Sly Flourish bookstore, except for City of Arches, with free shipping to the US and UK. If you have a purchase of $60 or more, all of these discounts are applied at checkout. It's a great time to pick up extra copies of your books to give to your friends who are playing RPGs. Great time to fill in the rest of your library. This is 20% off of both physical and digital releases. And the digital releases, as you add digital stuff to your cart, still counts towards the $60 for the free shipping that you get on physical books. And that free shipping does apply to City of Arches. The 20% discount does not apply to City of Arches because it's too new, but the $60 or more, if you buy $60 or more, you can get City of Arches with free shipping in the US and the UK. Great time to pick up any of your favorite Sly Flourish books, and a great time to pick up some Sly Flourish books for your friends or new game masters in your life. Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and the Lazy DM's Companion are probably the two most useful ones that I think for brand new GMs that are just getting started. Forge of Foes, excellent for 5e monster creation and monster manipulation and understanding how to run monsters. So lots of great products there. And of course, a whole collection of the fantastic products, which are all available digitally on the Sly Flourish bookstore. All 20% off right now until December 17th. Don't miss out. You'll be sad. Last week on Sly Flourish, I posted the article Running Shadowdark's Scarlet Minotaur as a one-shot. This was an article about how to run the adventure that comes as part of the quick start guide for Shadowdark. You can get it absolutely free. The whole digital copy of this is absolutely free. The adventure is free. The rules are free. The pre-gens are free. It's a fantastic way to enjoy Shadowdark. Shadowdark is one of my favorite role-playing games. I really love it. It is my favorite game to run at conventions. I now pretty much exclusively run Shadowdark at conventions because it's so easy to get started and so easy to play, and you get to cover so much stuff in such a short period of time. I really, really like it. So I did an article about how to run the adventure that's in the Quick Start Guide, Scarlet Minotaur, as a one-shot with a timed event in which the Minotaur, you have to collect 3 powerful magic items before the Minotaur comes and kicks your ass. And it's a really fun scenario, and it was really fun to run it, so I wrote an article about it, and you can find that on Sly Flourish. You could also have gotten it delivered to your inbox if you subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. Of course, it's too late now. However, you could subscribe to get the next article, so you should still subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. Links are in the show notes. And I also did a Readings and Reflections. This is the Patreon podcast for hero tier subscribers to Sly Flourish, where I talked about I read this article out loud, and I talked about the article, the background of it, and some of the thoughts about how can we take the model that we use here and use it with other adventures to do quick single session adventures where we know that it's going to fit within a certain amount of time, something that's actually very hard to do in normal adventures. Next week's article is Seek Adventure Prompts. In this article, we look at adventure prompts that you can find in campaign source books, things like the new Forgotten Realms books that came out, or the Midgard World book and other things. I use examples. And it's sort of like when you pick up a campaign book, look for these hooks. What are these hooks that you can grab onto and that give you just enough to inspire you to be able to build your own adventures? It's really where I think published material and homebrew material meet to offer the best flexibility and capability and drive and direction to help us run our games. So that's coming out next week. It'll be available right now if you're listening to this. I guess if you're listening to this as a podcast or watching this video, it is now on the Sly Flourish website. You can also get it to your inbox if you subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter, and you will get it as part of Readings and Reflections, the podcast, on Thursday if you become a hero tier patron of Sly Flourish. I would recommend doing all 3. I don't know why not. Last week on the Sly Flourish Patreon, I released the Monastery of Astaria. I think I did a little spotlight of it last week. Monastery of Astaria is a scenario, high-level scenario for the City of Arches, in which the characters chase after assassins who are hunting down the celestial Astaria, who is responsible for holding the curse of the Nameless King. It is a fun scenario. It's part of the big Nameless King arc in the City of Arches. I think it's a 4 or 5 page scenario intended for you to customize it around your own campaign, and that was released to hero tier subscribers of the Sly Flourish Patreon last week. And I've got some exciting stuff coming out for hero tier subscribers of the Patreon in the future as well. That is going to be a good time. I was on the Games with Dave stream. This is with Dave, who does RPG interviews with various folks. I had a really fun opportunity to talk to him all about role-playing games. Really enjoyable conversation, 1 hour stream. You can find a link down in the show notes to check it out, where we talk about how I got started in this, and we talk about publishing, and we talk about gaming, and all just kinds of fun stuff. It was a really, really fun conversation. A little bit about my dad, right? We talked about my dad, who is Robert Shea, the co-author of the book Illuminatus. He found, when he was doing some research on me, figured that out, and was like, oh my God, I can't believe your dad wrote an Illuminatus. That is true. My father wrote Illuminatus. So really fun interview and a really good time. I would check that out. Check out his channel, Games with Dave. You can subscribe to it right there and check out some of the other interviews that he's done. Really fun time. Really good podcast. I highly recommend it. We're in kind of an interesting time. It's quiet, right? It's the holidays. People are on break, right? Not a lot of big announcements. Not a really good time to put out a lot of big announcements because everybody's kind of busy with other things. So not a lot of news going on in the RPG world. Wizards of the Coast did have their most recent release, Forge of the Artificer, which was a short book that came out that is sort of a supplement to the Eberron Rising from the Last War supplement, the Rising from the Last War campaign guide that came out a few years ago at this point, which is, I think, my favorite campaign source book. I think the Eberron Rising from the Last War source book it's certainly my favorite one from Wizards of the Coast. It might be my favorite one overall, though I really like the Midgard World book a lot, so it's really hard to say. And Forge of the Artificer sort of updates the material from Eberron Rising from the Last War for D&D 2024. I kind of bristle because it's like, I thought the whole point was backward compatibility, and now you're saying, no, it's not really backward compatible because we're selling you the same thing again. So I was grumpy about this one. I don't know, grumpy. I always thought like it was a weird product. I haven't dove into it. I don't have a physical copy, and I haven't dived into it yet. But if you want to read 2 articles that talk about Forge of the Artificer, there are now 2 articles up on EN World. There's a first impressions article written by Christian Hoffer that talks about kind of the surface level glance of what's in here and what's going on. And then a deeper dive, which just came out a couple of days ago by Beth Rimmels. And this goes in quite a bit deeper into them and the different interesting perspectives on both. What I'm most curious about, so I guess like if I had a recommendation, and this is a recommendation without having like opened it and read it and understanding it, I don't imagine it's the kind of book I would buy unless I was planning to run an Eberron campaign. And if I am running an Eberron campaign, then I'd probably be more likely to run it. The question is like, should you buy it on D&D or buy it? Should you buy a limited license on D&D Beyond for it, or should you pick up the physical copy when a good reason that anybody's picking this up is all the mechanical crunchy bits for the new Artificer? I'm not sure. The big question to me is, how useful is the campaign information? It does have campaign stuff in there, about 50 pages of campaign information that's in there. The question is, how useful is that when you run it alongside what you already have with Eberron Rising from the Last War? I do not have plans to run an Eberron campaign for a while, probably like a year from now. So I don't know that it's the book. I don't think it's a book I need to pick up right away. And I don't think I would pick it up if I wasn't planning to run an Eberron game. That's all saying I haven't looked at it yet, right? I haven't read it yet. I have it on D&D Beyond, but I glanced through it a little bit on D&D Beyond, but not very much. So I would... my recommendation, real recommendation, is go read these reviews and see what you think of the reviews. But I would probably say that the big question I have is whether or not it's the kind of thing you would want to buy if you weren't planning to run Eberron. And if you are planning to run Eberron and the campaign information looks like it's useful to you, then it seems like it'd be a reasonable thing to get. So my main recommendation is read the articles and see what you think, having read the articles. But I do not yet have an opinion on it, really. Also over on EN World were the most anticipated RPGs of 2026 nominations. So I really like this. Every year they nominate, hey, what RPGs are you really excited for in 2026? There are a couple of rules for posting an RPG that you're excited for. One is it's probably worth reading through to see if somebody already nominated it. Because if they did, you probably don't need to. You have to nominate the name of the product, the publisher of the product, and a link to the product, whether it's a link to a Kickstarter page or a link to something that shows something about it. If you do not do those three things, Morris is not going to include your nomination. Name of the product, publisher of the product, and a link to the product. So these are not the Annies. These are just the nominations for the ones. It's a vote that happens on EN World where they say, hey, what RPG products are you most looking forward to? It is really interesting to look at what the previous ones were. So last year, for example, Starfinder 2nd Edition, Alien Evolved Edition, 13th Age 2nd Edition, Coriolis, Dolmenwood, Discworld, the MCDM RPG Draw Steel, Daggerheart, Cosmere, and Legend of the Mist were the top ones. And many of those have been released. So it's actually very interesting to kind of see what the list of previous ones were. And what this really shows me, because many of these, I'm not sure if all of these have been released. And so Legend of the Mist was number one. I think there was a little bit of ballot stuffing on this one, where the people who published Legends of the Mist said, hey, go vote for us on the thing. And I think they posted that on Kickstarter and stuff like that. So they got a lot of votes. And it was a little surprising because they're like, I don't know if it's quite as big as Cosmere, right? However, whatever, right? It doesn't matter. And you know, it's not an award, right? So it wasn't a big thing. Anyway, I don't know if Legend of the Mist came out. I don't know if I don't think Cosmere has come out yet. Somebody can remind me. Campaigning is not ballot stuffing, Scipio says. Yes, it is not, right. Did Cosmere come out? So Daggerheart came out, Draw Steel came out. I don't know if Discworld came out. Dolmenwood came out. Coriolis came out. 13th Age came out. Alien came out. And I don't know if Starfinder 2E came out. Yeah, both have come out. Has Starfinder come out? So what's interesting is like all of these RPGs are now out. And holy cow, like some of those are really big. Like some of those were ones I was definitely looking forward to. And many of them I bought. So it's really interesting how many awesome RPGs came out this past year. Looking at the list of the ones for 2026, I'm not seeing a list that looks similar to that, right? I really feel like maybe, and I could be wrong, we'll find out when we look at the nominations and see what ones were there. But, you know, I feel like all of the real big RPGs have come out in the last couple of years. And now we've got so many, and I've got way more cool RPGs than I can run. I talked about this last week, but it's fascinating to me that I think we may look back. I'm going to make a prediction, and I could totally be wrong about it, that we're going to look back at like the 2024, 2025 time period and be like, wow, a whole bunch of really awesome RPGs came out in those 2 years. Like great big RPGs from major publishers. So you had the new version of D&D. D&D 2024 came out then, but then you also had Daggerheart. You had Draw Steel. You had Dolmenwood. You had 13th Age. You had, Shadow the Weird Wizard came out then. So, wow, that's a lot of RPGs. Robert Table says, doesn't mean the golden age is over. I think the golden age just began. That's the beginning of the golden age, right? Because the golden age isn't when it's not releases that we care about. It's playing the games that we care about. And now we have all of the games to play. I look at a lot of these RPGs and I'm like, I could probably grab that system. And if it was the only one I ever had for the rest of my life, I bet you I could run a lot of adventures using that system. I don't feel like I need to have new systems all the time. There's a lot of systems that I try, but like I love 13th Age. I ran multiple 13th Age campaigns, right? And I bet you I can run multiple 13th Age campaigns with the new one. Same with Daggerheart, same with D&D 2024, same with all these. These are big RPGs that have a lot of flexibility. These are a lot of 50-year hamburgers, if I'm going to use the metaphor that Penny Arcade coined that I love, which is one of the things about the business of role-playing games is that you're essentially selling a hamburger that you can share with 6 of your friends for 50 years. Right? These are a lot of 50-year hamburgers. These are a lot of products that can last the rest of our lives. Pendragon was out in 2024, right? I got Pendragon. Michelle, I got it for Michelle's birthday. So we got tons of RPGs. I don't think it's the end. I think it's the beginning, right? I think it's the beginning of a time where we have so many, and the production value on these RPGs is through the roof. Right? They're gorgeous, right? I've gotten so many RPGs recently that are really good values, right? Really good amount of impact for the dollar and just fantastic, beautiful projects. Land of Eam and Dolmenwood and Nimble 5e Alien Evolved, Dragonbane, my product of the year, right? There's so many really gorgeous, beautiful. One Ring, I picked up the One Ring. I know One Ring's been around a little bit, but God, the products look fantastic. So really, really great. I think we're in a fantastic time. Like it's really great. But it's interesting to me looking at 2026, and I think like this was the big one, because I'm looking at 2026 and I'm not seeing RPG. And I could be wrong, right? Well, we'll know when the nominations are out. I could totally be wrong. But I was looking through the list and I was like, there's a couple that leapt out at me that I saw that people had posted. And one was Apocalypse World Burned Over. I'm excited for that because it's such a fundamental system for so many RPGs, the Apocalypse World and the Powered by the Apocalypse. That one really feels like a core engine is being updated. And the new Cypher system by Monty Cook Games, I'm excited to see that. So there's a handful of RPGs that I'm excited to see, but I didn't feel the same way about this past year where you had these giant whales like Daggerheart and like Draw Steel and like D&D 2024, right? And 13th Age in Dolmenwood, which we've been waiting for a while. So really interesting time. Anyway, if you have RPGs that you're excited for in 2026, you can tell me about them, but better yet, go to the EN World and post on the thread. Include the title, include the publisher, and include a link so that you can help out. But it looks really neat. And I'm excited to hear when it goes around and then when the voting goes in, and we'll see kind of get an idea of the top 10 list. That looks really fun. I had a pretty unique experience that I don't think a lot of people in the world have. I had two multi-year campaigns end in the same 2-week period. And then had both groups start brand new campaigns in two totally different systems that happened in the same week. And that was hard. I don't recommend it. I ran 2 session zeros, right? Two sessions where me and my players got together and built characters together and talked about what we were going to do and talked about the system and got started with the campaign. I ran both of them in 1 week, and that was hard because even though I knew I was going to do it and I had done my homework, I'd gone through. I don't think either of them went terribly. They went fine, but it was a lot of work. And it's more certainly running a session zero and getting ready to start off campaigns, big campaigns that are going to last a little while, takes longer than doing regular session prep. I don't think that's a big surprise. So I don't recommend it, but I now do have this experience, and I wanted to share some of my thoughts that I am calling a tale of 2 session zeros, which was general thoughts about these session zeros and how they went, and then actually talking about the individual session zeros for the 2 different games that I ran these session zeros for. That's what we're going to talk about today. So the 2 games that I did my session zeros for, my Wednesday game, we went from our 3x5e massive campaign. This was a 20th level 3x5e campaign, to a much more sort of rules light, faster character creation, folk heroic fantasy RPG of Dragonbane, which I've been very excited to run. And after running the session zero, I'm very excited to continue running it. It looks like it's going to be really fun. My players had a really good time. And then the second one was my multi-year D&D 2014 campaign, which started off as Shadowed Keep of the Borderlands, then extended out into the 3 original Drow adventures: Descent into the Depths of the Earth, Vault of the Drow, Queen of the Demon Web Pits, and then much of it homebrewed around this whole concept that I called the Black Cathedral, in which they battled the 2 heads of Demogorgon were fighting one another, and one of the heads managed to get the power over the other, and then they had to fight Demogorgon and defeat Demogorgon in the world so that Demogorgon wouldn't take over the whole region. So that was a really fun campaign. And that one we switched over to Daggerheart. So I've now run a session zero of Dragonbane, and I've run a session zero of Daggerheart, and I want to share my experiences with both. Michelle, my wonderful wife, asked me she says, what are the main things that you got from your experience running these session zeros? Like, what was clear? And I had 3 main points that I wanted to kind of clarify. Point number 1 is it really helps to have a checklist of the things you need to do in your session zero. Have it in front of you. And for me, the checklist was pretty straightforward. Of start off, introduce, get everybody kind of excited, the fact we're starting this brand new campaign. Go over your session zero 1-pager, your session zero campaign 1-pager, which I've talked about in the last episode, and I'm going to talk about more a little bit here of the how do you do your prep to get ready for this kind of thing. Go over your 1-page campaign guide, go through all of it, talk it all through. Then build characters together. Work with the characters to build together. If you are doing any sort of player-driven world creation stuff, now is a good time to ask those questions. And this is one of the tricks. This is one of the experiences that I had. If you have some thoughts about what questions you want to ask players to help fill out the world, there's a couple of good things you could do there too. One is have clear, defined questions. Don't leave wide open questions. This is sort of a trick in life. Only ask questions to the things you actually want the answers to. So what are the things you actually want them to answer? And I have two that worked really well in my Daggerheart game. One was, what are some features of this starting town where we're beginning? What are some of the things you like there? Like what are notable locations that exist here? That was one question. Another one was, let's talk about creating gods that are built on the domains of your character in Daggerheart. And we got some really interesting ones there. So having those focus questions, I think, really works. And making sure they're clear so that you know that you're getting answers to things you actually want. Like those gods, it's great. I didn't have any gods and now I have some gods. Like that's fantastic. But you don't want to be like, no, those are the wrong gods or those are the wrong locations, right? You don't want to ask things that you don't necessarily want, you think will steer the game in the wrong direction or steer it away from whatever the overarching campaign that you and your players had agreed to with. So an example on the town questions, like, hey, name some locations. It would be, we know we need some locations that are useful for your adventures. What are some of the locations in the town that you think could be useful? For example, an inn or a general store or, a temple, right? Like ask them, steer them towards the directions of things you're going to need so that they're not coming up with town features that you're never really going to come into play. That's an example of like steering the question slightly. And here's the other trick. Different players are going to have different amounts of time that they need to build their characters. Some people are going to be able to build their characters very quickly, and they're going to be kind of sitting around waiting for everybody else to finish theirs. Those are the ones you want to ask the world building questions to. So don't throw the world building questions at the people who are still super busy building their characters out. Instead, and make the questions loose. They're not hard. There's only going to be so many questions and you're not going to get your opportunity. But it's a way to keep people engaged with this session who otherwise wouldn't be because they finished making their character too quickly. Or not too quickly, but they made their character quickly. And now you can engage them and say, hey, maybe come up with a second god, or maybe there's another location. And that way they're still engaged in the world building aspects while the other players are still engaged with character building. That was something that came up to me when I was running Session Zeros. That was particular for my Daggerheart, for the Daggerheart game, where Daggerheart really leans in on the players helping to generate elements of the story, more so than I would say Dragonbane does. You can certainly do it with Dragonbane. You can do it in any RPG, but Daggerheart is kind of wired in. Daggerheart also had pretty significant, complicated character building stuff going on, which meant we took some time. I'll get into that when I talk about Daggerheart. So if you get nothing else from my little talk, those would be like the three main things that I would say. Number one, have a clear checklist of the things that you want to cover in your Session Zero and walk through that checklist, like literally put it on an index card in front of you or something so that you can make sure to hit all the things that you want to do. Two is steer world creation with clear questions about things you want to actually get answers to from your players about building the world so that it's not super expansive. It's instead, you wouldn't say like, let's all build a history of the campaign setting together and you'll be there all day. Instead, you want to be like, name an interesting adventure location your character has always wanted to go to. Right? Do something like that. Steer questions towards the players about things that you're going to be able to use when you're actually running your adventure. Think about that spiral campaign development and build those questions. And then give questions to the players who were quicker at building their characters so they have a way to stay engaged in the session while the people who are taking longer to build their characters are still building their characters. Those would be like my three lessons that I learned from this double header of Session Zeros. But now I want to talk about each of the games themselves. So Dragonbane, this was my Wednesday group. The main points that I'd like to offer, you know me, I'm big on summaries. I want to give you bottom line up front, right? I want to give you useful things that you could use right away or that really help you out. Dragonbane's character creation was really quick, right? It was quick and it was easy to do. Like people were able to kind of whip through it. It's still, building characters together and talking it all through. We had 3 people that were playing online. We had 4 people that were in person. We had 7 players at the game. No, 6 players. We had 6 players at the game, 4 in person and 2 online. And, it took time because there's a lot of conversation back and forth about things that are going on. And the system was brand new to everybody. But character creation was pretty quick. The character sheets are really great. It's one side of one sheet of paper, pretty clear how to do it. And I have a recommendation for a Dragonbane cheat sheet that I picked up on itch.io. And I will link to it in the show notes. I got to remember to link to it in the show notes. I will link to this itch.io sheet. It is two sides of one sheet of paper. So you can print it out on one sheet, double-sided, and give it to your players. It has a lot of the information about how to build characters, but not quite enough to totally build the characters. You're still going to need the source book. I had two physical copies of the Dragonbane core book at my table for 4 players. I was using a digital copy myself. I had an iPad and I had my digital copy, and that was not enough. So one unfortunate thing about Dragonbane is that I really think like you need a good number of those books on hand when you're doing character creation, or be ready to share them a lot, right? Share them among the table, because there's a lot of stuff you're going to have to look up in the book that isn't even on the cheat sheet. The cheat sheet has a lot, but it doesn't have quite enough. And you're still going to want to look some things up that are only explained in the book itself. I bought an extra copy of the book and it showed up one day late. So I was missing a book one day late, but now I've got 3 physical copies of the Dragonbane core book that we can have at our table when we're playing our game. You probably don't, and of course you really only need it for character creation. You probably don't need it that often for the actual game itself. But now I've got 3 copies. I bought it when it was on sale. We got it on sale, and that was great. So that was the main things. The character creation was quick. The character sheets are really great. Make sure to have that cheat sheet. And you probably want to have extra copies of the book. You probably don't need one for every player, but it can't hurt to have one for every player minus 1 or 2, right? Like it should be pretty close so that you're going to want more than one. And I would have maybe 3 copies for 5 players, probably. I would make sure to have more. So we used the 4d6 drop the lowest for rolling ability scores. And that was scary. And it was fun. People were into it, right? Nobody was really sad, and everybody kept their scores. I did have a loose house rule. I was trying to figure out the whole, if you roll under a certain amount of times, or if you have scores that are under a certain thing, then you can re-roll. And instead I'm like, why am I coming up with some arbitrary rule? How about instead if the player is unhappy with the scores they got, they can re-roll? What's wrong with that? Now, min-maxers are like, well, then I'm going to roll all day long until I get 6 18s. Okay, you can leave, right? You can doors that way, right? Players aren't going to do that. My players aren't going to do that, right? My players are going to live with their scores if they're decent, right? And they get to decide, why am I the one who decides what decent is? Right. So I just basically said, if you're unhappy with your scores, you can re-roll them. Most everybody was happy with their scores. Everybody was pretty happy with the scores. We had some that were really good. We had some that were fine. We had a few that were really good. We had one person who rolled pretty poorly. Their highest ability was a 15 in one thing. They were 10s and 11s on almost everything, and they had a 5. And that really, the 5 hurt. And they put the 5 in strength because they're a merchant, and they're like, I really don't need strength. And then they realized, that means I can carry 2 things. But at least I have a donkey. And he's like, I'm so happy I have a donkey because my donkey can carry my stuff for me. So thank God I have a donkey. That was really funny. So the player was a really good sport and kept them. And I told them, if you really don't like me, that's pretty low. If you really want to try another shot, you can roll again. But no, they kept it. Those abilities really matter, right? The abilities really matter in what you're going to do. Constitution, your hit points are your Constitution score. So whatever you roll in Constitution, that's how many hit points you have. So he has 11, right? He had 11 hit points because he kept one, he rolled an 11 on his hit points. Some other ones had an 18, right? They did really well. So the abilities really matter. And, so my little house rule of if you're unhappy with them, you can roll them again. I was like, if you do it twice, we're going to make fun of you. Right. That was the main detriment is if you roll too many times, we're going to make fun, right? We're going to laugh at you. So you don't want to do that. An interesting thing that Dragonbane does is that there's a calculation. There's a little table that tells you what skill score you have based on your ability, and it's pretty flat, right? It's not a big steep curve, which means even though you might roll kind of mid on a score, on an ability, or high on ability, it's not really making your score that much better. And instead, the scores you're trained in matter a lot, because that one doubles it. So, generally speaking, like 14 was about as high a skill as somebody had when they just started out. But that actually meant that there was a way to kind of tamp down abilities, that the ability rolls, so that they didn't quite matter so much, right? It was a less than linear benefit for an ability. And that's based on a table they have. That was an interesting little bit of thing. One thing I knew going in, I had talked to some friends of mine that had played it, and I had played it myself, and I played a solo version of it, and I knew this was the case. So skills matter a lot. And like skills in Dragonbane have specific things that they do for you during gameplay that really matter and are important. It's not really a kind of loose interface to the world like it is in D&D 5e. You're not going to be able to sleep well at night, literally, if you don't have a good bushcraft skill. Now, there's ways that, one character needs a good bushcraft and a good tent in order to help people sleep. But like, if you're trying to sleep on your own, you got to roll a bushcraft check. And if you fail the check, you're not going to be able to sleep well, which means if your bushcraft sucks, you're going to have a really hard time sleeping out in the wild, right? And that means you might not be able to rest. You might not be able to get stuff back like everybody else does. Healing and crafting and some of the other ones, you're like crafting. People, you crafting. Well, crafting repairs your armor, and you need your armor to help you defend yourself in combat and stuff like that. So the skills really matter, right? The skills, you really need to read what those skills do. And what I did, another little house rule that I put in play, which was the same level of, sort of the house rule of if you hate your scores, re-roll them, which I like that one a lot, because it's like, it's up to you, man. Like, you're playing the game, right? Why am I telling you when you can or can't re-roll your abilities? In the same way, I said, like, if you find out that there are skills you really wish you'd had and didn't realize how important they were and skipped them, you can respec. Right? You can as long as you're not respecing constantly throughout a whole game. At the beginning of a session or whatever, or at the end of a session, you can respec and say, yeah, I really want to, I should have trained this one. I'm going to untrain this one and train this one because I really should have. I had done that in my solo game, and that worked really well. So I thought that helped a lot. So there are some classes that feel like they have less utility. We all joked about the Mariner, right? There is a Mariner class that's clearly like the sea person, and there's nothing going on with the sea anywhere in this game. And the campaign adventure, and they said we're all going to be Mallard Mariners. One of their thoughts was we were going to be called a group called Oops All Ducks, and we're all going to be Mallard Mariners. And all we're going to do is anytime we see water, that's where we're going. Right? If it's a river or a pond or a pool, that's where we're going. We're not going to adventure locations. We're not doing anything else. We're only going to go to wherever there's water. And I thought that was pretty funny. But there are some classes that really have less utility. There are some classes that you look at and you go, I wonder what this utility is going to be. The merchant, we have a merchant and a scholar. So people rolled randomly in some cases to see what class they would pick, because there's a bunch of classes and there's a way to roll randomly for your classes. And we have one merchant and we have one scholar. And I think the scholar is actually going to be pretty useful in like an investigator, Sherlock Holmesy kind of way. Because this isn't just a combat-focused game, right? It's not a whole thing where you're just fighting the whole time. You're doing a lot of talk. You're also figuring out ways to get out of situations. There's a lot of discovery going on in this. So I think the scholar is going to come out. The merchant class will be pretty interesting. I'm not sure. The merchant might end up being kind of the face of the characters. So we're going to see how that works out. The merchant is the one who has a 5 strength and a donkey. So we're going to see how that plays out. But again, it's going to be the kind of thing like if you want to retire a character and start a new one, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about that. When we were talking on the Discord server a bunch about how do you pitch RPGs to players if you have specific RPGs that you want to play, specifically more classical, folk heroic, old school style RPGs. How do you sell those to your players? And I brought up that one of the things that I felt really could sell it is the art. And some people were like, I don't know, I don't think players really look at the art. My players certainly looked at the art especially when they had the books in hand and they were looking through. They all remarked on, wow, the art in this is really cool. The art for Dragonbane is really, really cool, and the players recognize the art. And I printed out from the campaign guide. I'm using the campaign adventure as our main adventure for it, and I have the PDF, and I would snapshot portraits and remove the background using Apple's preview background removal tool, and then threw that in a PowerPoint presentation, then printed them out and cut them out. So now I've got these like face pictures that I can show the players. And we laughed because spoiler for the adventure, but the first NPC you meet dies, and I had to be very clear, like there's no way everybody wanted to save his life. So when I showed this picture, they're like, as soon as they saw this guy, they're like, oh yeah, that guy's a goner. Like, I was like, look at his eyes. He's got black veins coming out of his eyes, and his teeth are bloody, and he's got like stuff coming out of his mouth. Like, yeah, that guy's all done. Right? So that was pretty funny when as soon as I showed the face, I explained to them, like, you can look at the wounds and you can tell these are lethal wounds here now. And they're like, oh really? There's no check? And I was like, look at him. Like, okay, yeah, never mind. That guy's a goner. So that, I thought that was pretty funny. But they really love the art. I really thought it was interesting that sometimes Dragonbane is so easy that sometimes it gets confusing, that it took a while to figure out that, like, when you're attacking, you just roll a sword check, right? There's some part, so there's a couple parts of it that are confusing. Like, you get a damage bonus if you have an ability score that's over a certain amount in the ability that you're using for a weapon, and so you want to kind of keep track of that. But it's really, like, it's the thing that I love about Dragonbane, I think, the most, the roll under system. And my players, I think all of them remarked of, oh my God, rolling low is good is going to take us time to figure out. I actually don't think it's going to be that bad. Michelle actually wrote on her character sheet, like, a 1 is good and a 20 is bad. She wrote it like on her sheet so that she'd remember, oh, that's right, 20s are bad, right? 20s are called a demon and they're bad. So the roll under, but the nice thing about the roll under system, which I adore, is the players know all the target numbers. They know exactly what they're rolling, right? This is true with Call of Cthulhu too. It's something I noticed when I played Call of Cthulhu. It's really cool when all the DCs are on the sheet and the player, there's no negotiation with a DM and a player about whether or not a roll succeeded or not. They know if they succeeded, right? They roll. The only time a GM gets involved is if there's disadvantage, or what they call a boon or a bane, which is essentially advantage and disadvantage, right? So there are certain circumstances where you have a boon or a bane in a roll. But other than that, there's no DCs, right? And it makes GMing really straightforward. It also changes how GMing works. For example, you can't use one of my tricks, which I used in this one, and realize there's another trick that I learned. This is a very early trick. The trick is in 5e, a lot of times, if I wanted somebody to notice something, I would have everybody roll a perception check, and whoever got the highest is the person who noticed it. And that was a way of making sure the information wasn't locked, right? They didn't get locked. They didn't lock the information. The information wasn't gated. It just meant that by rolling, we determined through the die roll and adding the skill bonus for those who had a high perception that who did it. Well, you can't do that when you have the success or fail mechanic on the sheet, because they know if they succeeded or failed on I forget what they call it in Dragonbane. So here's like the Dragonbane character sheet over here. So you have a awareness check, right? Awareness is sort of your investigation and perception roll, right? It's seeing things. It's an intelligence-based seeing things check. You can't say, everybody give me an awareness check, and then have everyone fail and then tell them the thing that they saw, right? If they all fail, it's gated. Like, they didn't see it, and they know if they failed because they roll and they have the DC in front of them. So a trick that the campaign guide does, and I saw it once, I remember poor Mr. Black Vein in the Eyes situation. Dude who died, Weatherall or something was his name. In the text of the adventure, it says, whoever has the highest charisma, he will speak to whoever has the highest charisma. And that is the Dragonbane version of everybody rolling. Instead of everybody rolling, you say, who has the highest awareness score? And I have a 14. Okay, you notice that this thing is true. So that's something I have to get used to, right? And I could even write down for each of the skills who has the highest. And that way I could look down the list and tell characters what they notice when they need to notice something, right? This is a way to kind of figure out that when you don't want to gate something, when you want to make sure that somebody notices it, that's a trick that you can do. So that was something that I became aware of in our first session while we were in part of our session 0 while we were going. Initiative. Everyone really liked the initiative system of drawing cards. It was tricky because we had 4 in-person players and 2 online players. So we would have other players draw cards for the online players and then put them. I had their names written down on my Chessex battle mat, written down with my Stedler 315-9 wet erase medium point black marker, and I put the initiative cards next to their names so that I could keep track of who was where. But people really liked it. They were like, yeah, it's fast. We don't have to add anything. We just draw a card and that's where we go. They didn't really do any initiative swapping yet, but initiative swapping is a big part of Dragonbane. And I told them, that's going to be a big part of your tactics for survival, is knowing who's going to go before who. So it worked really well. Monsters are scary. So this is just an initial observation of Dragonbane, not so much a session 0 thing, but something I have seen that it took me a little bit to understand about Dragonbane is there are two kinds of opponents in Dragonbane. There are NPCs and there are monsters. NPCs are your goblins and your orcs and your skeletons. They are any creature where, generally speaking, you have one creature that's roughly the equivalent of a character, right? So skeletons, you're not going to have one skeleton. Monsters are almost all like legendary monsters in D&D. All of the monsters are big. They're intended to be run one for the whole group. Generally speaking, there's one monster like the Harpies where it's actually 3 Harpies, but they're all part of one monster stat block. So that one's kind of interesting. But generally speaking, each monster is its own thing. So in the starter adventure, in the initial encounter, you have a goblin on a warg, and they are one monster, and they have multiple initiatives. And that way they act often, and their actions are big. They do big, nasty things. They do big, scary, nasty things that often affect an entire group or can really slam down one particular character at a time. So monsters are really scary. Fear is even scarier. Fear in Dragonbane. So one of the things we noticed is the monster that they fought. It was the goblin warg hybrid, right? It was a goblin on top of a warg that was a monster, and they hit it and crit on it on the first hit and did 20 damage to it, which would knock out almost anything, except this guy had like 24 hit points. So he's still around. And then he got 3 actions before they managed to take him out. And he missed, a big attack was dodged, and was evaded. And then he did a roar, and the roar caused fear, and everybody had to make essentially the equivalent of a saving throw. You make an ability check against the fear. And we're like, I wonder what fear is. And we looked it up, and we're like, wow, fear is like 1d8 against your will. And one of the characters lost 3/4 of their will right away. Another character ran away, right? And it was like, wow, fear really matters. Like, fear was really scary. So that was really interesting. So that was our session 0. The session 0, we went through character creation. Everybody really enjoyed our characters. We had a lot of laughs. We had a really good time with that. Nobody really had trouble making their characters. Again, the only issue was book trading was difficult. And we had room to have our initial adventure. I really like the campaign adventure that's included in the Dragonbane core set, right? The core set was my product of 2025, my favorite product of 2025. And the campaign adventures that are in there are really, really good. There's 2 little tricky bits with the campaign adventure that worry me. Spoiler, and don't listen to this if you're playing in the campaign adventure. It has a bit of quest NPC betrayal that bothers me, but I think there's an easy way for me to kind of manipulate that. And it has a bit of the all or nothing collection quest thing, which doesn't on the surface appear to be a problem. But it's always something I'm aware of, that whenever you have you must collect all 4 things, I'm always worried that one of the players will figure out, can't we just destroy one of these things and then nobody can collect it, and then then it's never a problem. So you always have to have these secondary situations going on to ensure that if they don't manage to get the things, that it still doesn't matter. So those are 2 little tricky bits that I noticed when I was reading the adventure. But otherwise, it's a very big sandbox adventure. It's very easy to run, very easy to process. I really, really, really liked it. I thought it was really good, so I'm excited for that. So I will probably have, after we get a couple sessions under our belt, I will probably have another sort of initial thoughts on Dragonbane when we run it. And I will almost certainly when we're done have okay, now I've really played Dragonbane and I have thoughts. But I'll tell you, my initial thoughts going in are, I really, really like this game. I really think it's a good system. The only thing that worries me about it really is that it is a folk heroic RPG where the characters are at risk a lot. And I don't know if my players who are used to being super heroic NPCs are going to be very excited about suddenly being folk heroic NPCs. Again, having your character really nailed by a single bad saving throw from a fear effect, that might diminish some of their enjoyment of the game after being used to being a 20th level 5th edition character, right? So that's the only part that I'm worried about. It doesn't bother me, and I'm not sure it's going to bother all the players. I certainly don't think it's going to affect all the players. I know one of the players, as soon as he finishes, he's like, I like this better than 5e. I think this is a fantastic RPG. I like it better than 5e. That was one of the players. I don't know if they all feel that way. But nobody was against it. By the time we finished character creation, everybody's pretty excited about their characters. The only thing I'm worried a little bit about is the idea that your character is really, things are dangerous. Like, it is a dangerous game. So, that was our Dragonbane stuff. Daggerheart. So the main point I'd like to make about Daggerheart was that character creation took a while. And because character creation often includes a lot of character connection activities, character backgrounds, and a lot of world building activities, it took the whole session. So we had a 3-hour online game. We had 5 players, all online. I think there was myself and Michelle were in one room, and 2 of our other friends were in one room, but otherwise everybody was kind of split apart. So we didn't really have a lot of people at the table. And character creation took the whole time. So by the end of the session, we had all our characters built, and we had some good understanding of the town that was going on, some interesting locations, some interesting gods that we had created to kind of flavor the setting a bit. So we had a fair bit, but we did not have enough time to run a small adventure. I had set aside like a single encounter that I thought I would run, and we never got to it. Daggerheart has a lot of fiddly bits. Right? That's the one thing I notice is there's a lot of fiddly bits. There's a lot of mechanics that take time to understand. And the example is when you look at like what typically is armor class and hit points is actually split across 5 different things of armor and threshold and evasion and hit points and stress. And you're like, all of these things have like ways they interact with each other. And it takes time to understand like where that comes from and how you get them and everything like that. The character building is really fun, right? And I think it's a good process. I really love the class-based character sheets. So one of the tricky bits with running the session 0 was if you don't necessarily know if the players don't know what class they're going to play, you can't print the character sheets yet. Because you're not going to have the character sheet. You want to use one of the class-based character sheets, but you can't have them ready ahead of time if you don't know who the classes are going to be. So in our case, we would just figure out what the classes were first, and then we'd go print the sheets, and then people could use the class-based character sheets. The class-based character sheets are really, really excellent. So I really like the class-based character sheets, but you kind of don't know which ones you're going to need until the players have actually picked their class. So that was a little tricky bit we had with us, but it was fine. It is a little fiddly when you consider all the cards. There was something about where am I supposed to put my their equivalent of a background, right? Where the loreborn and I forget what they call it, but it wasn't actually on the character sheet, and instead it's a card. And so it took time to figure out the cards. And then some of the players hadn't yet opened the cards up yet. So they were like, oh, which deck of cards was it? And one of the other players knew which one of the decks, because there's like 6 decks of cards in there. There's a lot of cards going on. You got to find all that stuff. That made it a little bit fiddly. So it can take a little long. It could take some time in order to get all that. Now, if you're playing with everybody in person, if you've got the material in front of you, it's easier to kind of point things out. But online, that was a little trickier. And we weren't using any digital tools. So I know that Daggerheart is available on Demiplane. So, there are digital tools available for this. Communities, thank you. So there was no actual slot to mark your community on the character sheet, which is kind of weird. But it also meant that you needed to go get your community card. So a lot of things are card-based, which is both good and bad. It means there's a lot of mechanics in this game. There's a lot of crunchy bits. It is what I would definitely consider a crunchy RPG. The crunchiness is kind of in a strange spot, though, because it's not tactical. It's not a tactical RPG. It is a story-focused RPG. So all the crunchy bits are really there to help kind of flesh out parts of the story that you're building, which is a really interesting mix. And don't get me wrong, I love it, right? Like, I'm really excited about this campaign. But I was surprised and seeing through the eyes of the players. These are all experienced players. Like, everybody's been playing RPGs before. But Daggerheart is different enough that you really need to spend some time to kind of pick it up, because it's not easy to kind of pick it up and go, I understand this. This is like X. It has taken elements from so many different other RPGs that it really is unique. And you're going to have to kind of understand each piece of it to really figure out how it works. It really, in that regards, it really helps if you and the players all freshen up on the rules and get together with the material and go over the material before you get together in the game, so that you might have an understanding of what exactly are thresholds again and how does evasion work, and having an understanding of all the materials that you have, that could definitely help. Having everybody do their homework, I think, is something that can work out. The world building session 0 definitely worked, and this is where the experiences that I shared previously of. That for people who are able to build their characters quickly, you can give them more of the world building responsibilities, and those who are still working on their characters, they don't have to jump in on that right away. You can use that as sort of a dial on making sure everybody's got something to do. One trick with the world building stuff, though, is names are hard. names are hard for everybody. Coming up with good names are hard. So when you talk about like gods and stuff like that, you're like, what's the name of that god? Everyone stumbles. So this is one where like having a good access to a good random name generator, or each person has their own way of kind of doing names. Tell them like, if we're going to come up with names, you're probably going to have a system to come up with interesting names. And also, I know it didn't happen in my game, but I know it can happen that people will default to silly names. And do you really want to have silly stuff everywhere? My game is actually pretty lighthearted, so I don't mind some silly stuff. But you don't want to have too much silly things going on. So having a good tool that maybe you give to the players ahead of time to help them generate interesting names for gods. If you're going to offer names, if you're going to come up with NPCs, if you're going to come up with locations, if you're going to come up with gods, proper names are hard. And they're hard for everybody. And it can be scary because they could try to come up with ones and they're dumb or they're weird or they're silly or whatever, and you don't like them. And now you're stuck with them because you can't tell people wrong name, right? Like, so names are tricky. Got a cat. So that's why I say like, it's really worth knowing what questions you want to ask and having the right tools on board to help people with the world building aspects of your game. So those were my experiences doing session zeros of 2 different games. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait for my campaigns to grow from here. Doing 2 of them in 1 week was too much. Luckily, I don't think many people face that problem. But I learned a lot about each of these games. I'm excited for both games. I think they're very different games. Like, these are very different RPGs, but I'm really happy I kind of picked them because they're that different. And now I'm going to get these experiences running these awesome games. So I'm very excited for that. And in a future video, we'll talk more about our experiences running both Dragonbane and Daggerheart. So I recently did a video where we started talking about building lazy campaigns. What are the things that we GMs need to do to kind of get ourselves ready to build campaigns from scratch, or build campaigns that we're going to run with our players for new RPGs, new longer form RPGs. In the last video, I talked about building your campaign seed, choosing your systems, doing your hooks, getting your truths, coming up with factions if you need them, coming up with the questions that you want to offer to players for world building if you need to do that, and preparing a short adventure. Also, writing a campaign handout for your players so that you have something to give to them so you can kind of pitch them on the campaign, show them where their character fits into the campaign, talk about those truths, go over house rules and go over safety tools. And I talked about running a session zero, where you actually go over the one-pager, you build your characters together, you choose your patron or faction, you build the campaign setting together, and maybe if you have time, you run your short adventure. Today, we're going to talk about what to do after that. So now you've had your session zero, you've gone through all of the stuff, and now you know who the characters are. The players have come up with some interesting aspects of the world if you did some kind of character or player-driven world narrative. And now you're ready to start doing some other stuff. So what do you do now? What's next on your list? And there's really a couple of paths that you're going to take. So the one path is to flesh out the rest of your campaign world that you need to run the next few sessions. You don't have to build out the whole campaign world totally. You don't need to build everything out now. But you do need to fill out what you received so that you're ready to have enough material on hand to start running sessions and running adventures for your group. And this gets to a thing, and there are different ways to do this, but I have a way that I prefer, and I have a way that I recommend, and that has been recommended to me by other GMs as well, that I'm going to call spiral campaign development. Spiral campaign development essentially says your campaign starts with the characters as the focal point of your campaign and spirals outwards. So you don't have to build your whole world. You don't build 72 continents. Or 12 continents with 72 different empires. You don't have to build a 50,000-year history and 7 different pantheons for all these different cultures. You only need to worry about the stuff that's where the characters are and what's directly around them. This is true whether you're using a published campaign setting or you're coming up with your own homebrew campaign setting. The last time I did polls on this topic, about half of people were building homebrew campaign worlds and half of them were using published campaign worlds. But either way, that spiral campaign development works. A very common problem that people have with published settings is it's so vast and so big, how can I possibly get my head around all of this whole thing? And the answer is you don't have to. Pick where they're going to start and build outwards from there. Right? If you have the whole Forgotten Realms, start in the little halfling town of Cormorp in the center of Cormyr and build around there. You don't have to worry about what's going on in the deserts. You don't have to worry about what's going on in Icewind Dale. You don't have to worry about Calamshan. You don't have to worry about Thay. All you have to worry about is what's going on in the area that you're going to use. And that's called spiral development. Start where they are and build outwards. So that means figuring out where the game is going to start. right? What's that starting location? Often this is like a small town or a village. Sometimes it could be a specific area of a larger city, like a specific neighborhood of a larger city. And you want to start to fill that place out. Now, you could have your players help fill this out if you do that sort of character-driven or player-driven narrative of like, hey, name some of the locations that might exist in this starting area, or name a location that your character likes to go to, or a location that you think would be useful for the adventures to come to head. Or you can come up with them yourself. But even then, when you're thinking about what locations you want in your starting location, think about the ones that are going to help you go on adventures. Where do they stay when they need a rest? Where do they go buy equipment? Where do they go to talk to people that are tied to their classes? If you ever need to figure out like what locations to fill out what specific locations to fill out a larger location with, like a town, look at the characters and say, what place would this character want to go to? If they're a paladin or a cleric, you probably need a temple. If they're a barbarian or a fighter, maybe they need an adventurer's guild. If they're a bard or a rogue, maybe they need a seedy bar with a good stage, right? If they are a sorcerer or a wizard, maybe they need a wizard's tower or a sage's place or an old witch's hut that they like to go to. So think about the locations that are going to be useful to the characters. This is really that exercise of spiraling out from the characters. What are the locations they're going to need to have adventures? Those are the ones you need to fill out. You don't need to fill out everything. You need to fill out the ones that give them what they need to go on adventures. So that's really, and then one thing I like to do is add a fantastic feature. What is an interesting feature of this town that makes it unique among all of the others, right? In the town of White Sparrow, in my book Fantastic Adventures, there was a giant stone hand that was reaching out of the ground. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew if it was part of a larger thing. It was just a giant hand sticking out of the ground. I thought that was a fun feature. A lot of people kind of hung on that feature, so it really worked well. Then you could start to spiral out a little more and start to give yourself some of the variables to help build your campaign. 3 villains, quests, and goals and quests. So I like to have 3 villains. Sometimes I have like a short-term villain, a medium-term villain, and a long-term villain. Sometimes they work for each other. Sometimes they're totally separate. And each of these villains that you kind of come up with, and a villain doesn't have to be an actual entity. It could be something like a storm or a coming meteor or some kind of big catastrophic event that's coming along. That could work out. Who are these 3 villains that you have? What are quests? What are the goals that those villains are working on? And what 3 quests are they currently working on to accomplish those goals? This is actually pretty meaty, and it might be more than you really need for your first initial sessions, but it's a fun way to build out the world in a way that can be directly relevant to the players, because those quests are things the characters are going to see moving on, right? These are the actions of three big actors and the things that they're doing, and the players are going to be witnessing these, and it's really what makes the world come alive. So that really works. A next dirty trick is having a faction list. I'm a huge fan of building a faction list. Faction lists could be gods, historic figures, your villains, they're big icons, heroes, bits of history, but you want to have a list of things that you can roll on to flavor items and monuments and temples and locations and NPCs that can tie them to the factions that are in your world. You don't need to have a giant book of the whole history. You could just list like 10 factions. Maybe some of them are gods, maybe some of them are heroes, maybe some of them are villains. These are ways to kind of add the texture of your unique campaign to the items that show up in that campaign, whether they're monsters or NPCs or monuments or anything like that. You don't have to finish your whole faction list now, and obviously it can evolve over the campaign, but it can really work well. Then you need your 3 adventure locations. What are 3 locations in the area that the characters might go to on adventures, and what quests might take them to those areas, right? And this is where you can use random tables. I have a whole bunch in the Lazy GM's reference document, the Lazy GM's resource document, where you can find locations, you can flavor those locations, you can use your faction list to flavor them, you can drop some interesting monsters on them, and then come up with a reason why the characters need to go there. And I have a big quest list that's in that document as well that says that they're going there to recover something or to save somebody or to find something or to kill an evil foe or whatever. Come up with a reason why they'd want to go to those. And those are the things you're actually going to drop in front of your players when it's time for them to go on a quest. So that's really the next steps for fleshing out your campaign after you've had your first session 0. There's a lot of stuff that's in there, but once you have that stuff, you can use the material that you developed in that part to kind of build all the adventures that are coming on out. So what about running lazy campaign adventures? What are the things that you actually need to do now to build the adventures that you're going to run for your game? Well, that's where the 8 steps of Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master comes in. Now that you've got the material, now that you know information about the characters, now that you have information about the world and what's going on around those characters, now you can start doing your prep. Who are the characters and what do they have that's tied to what's going on? What's your strong start? What scenes are you going to do? What secrets and clues can they discover? What locations might they go to? What NPCs might they interact with? What monsters might they fight? And what treasures might they acquire? Those are the 8 steps from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. I mostly did that out of my own head. I'm pretty happy with that. So that's about finishing up fleshing out the rest of your 8 steps. Now it's time to just start doing your prep like you would for anything else. You can focus on your quests, right? My favorite quest model is someone wants you to go somewhere to do something. It's a very simple quest model, right? You build your quests out there. You offer 3 quests, ideally at the end of a session, so that players know what they're going on, and so that you know what one they're going to pick so that you can prepare that. And think about the character is acting and the world reacts to the actions of the characters. And that's how your campaign builds. The campaign can evolve through the eyes of your villains. So you know that the villains are also doing things. They're trying to accomplish things. What are they doing? And how are they reacting to the actions of the characters? That really becomes the larger story that's at play. But all of it kind of comes down to running your adventures. Now, you might have to flesh out your world even more. This is sort of a big optional step. What else do you need to do to build out your larger world? The first thing to understand is your players probably don't care about your world as much as you do. So you have to be prepared for that. You might have, and this is a very common thing I see with new GMs, is they have huge ideas for vast worlds. They want to dive in so deep. They have huge histories. Because we don't have a lot of creative outlets in our lives. And suddenly we find ourselves with a creative outlet and we want to fill it with everything that we've been dying to do for our whole lives. No one cares. Your players don't care. No one else cares. I'm sorry to tell you. I hate to be the one to tell you. No one cares. So that really means you want to be building things that are useful to the game you're going to be running for the players who are going to be focused on their characters. So could you build a history? Yes, but build a practical history. Build a history that matters for the things that the characters are doing, the things that they're going to discovering. The history can be built out through those secrets and clues that you're offering up in each of the sessions games, rather than building a giant Bible of the whole history of everything that's ever happened. Building a practical pantheon. Start with, who are the gods the characters need? Who are the gods the characters oppose? You don't need to have a huge pantheon of 28 gods. You could just pick the ones that the players have chosen. One of the things I like for Daggerheart is I'm building the gods based on the domains of the various powers that the characters have. That's really practical. So practical is the word of the day for this, right? Build the stuff that you need to run the sessions that you're running. That's the stuff that you really need. Have factions, include factions. I like to have 2 good guy factions, 2 shady factions, and 2 evil factions, right? These can kind of augment your villains. Maybe the villains are part of the factions, or the factions work for the villains or something like that. You don't need a lot more. And all of those factions are ones that the characters can interact with. Again, you're focused on those characters you're building outwards. Instead of building your own crazy magic system, just use the default magic system for the game system that you're using, right? Try not to get fancy. Somebody else spent a lot of time thinking about that magic system. I'm sure you really like your spell point based system. If you really want that, find a game that uses spell points, or just live with the magic system as it has. Again, people don't care. And if you're changing the rules on people, it's going to be really tough. Build a useful economy. What kind of economy do you actually need? There can be a lot of fun that you can have with an economy. I'm having a lot of fun messing around with the economy of my Dragon Empire game. But you want it to be an economy that is directly relevant to the goals of the campaign and to the drive of the players and the drive of their characters and things like that. The main step there is build what you need. Build what you need to run sessions for your group. That's what you're focused on. Don't worry about filling out everything else that's not going to come out. Don't build campaigns 5 years in the future. Don't build out huge histories no one's ever going to figure out. Build from those 8 steps. Build for the things that you need to have in front of your players, because that's the stuff you actually need to run your games. Over on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have the Sly Flourish Patreon Q&A. Every quarter, I put up a new thread. Every month, patrons can ask a RPG-related question. Every Friday, I answer all of those questions, and some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive into them a little deeper. Justin says, when you prep secrets for your session, do you find yourself thinking of types of secrets to diversify the information you present? My session prep template has some generic secret types, information, foreshadow, strength, weakness, etc., that I reference often when I'm stumped to inspire me to think outside the box. I'm curious if there's a list of secret types that you use to help you creatively think of different information to reveal for a session. That is a fantastic idea. And the idea that you came up with the prompts that help you come up with those secrets, I think, is the real power tip here. I'm going to offer some because I think there are some secrets. I do have some that I think about. I do have some secret, types of secrets that I think kind of help fire people up. And fire me up to come up with interesting secrets. And those kind of secrets are secrets about people, secrets about places, secret about gods, secret about histories, character-driven secrets. There's all different kinds of secrets. So over on Sly Flourish, I have an article called Types of Secrets. Character secrets, location secrets, historical secrets, NPC or villain secrets, plot revealing secrets, or adventure hooks. Right? So that's just a way to kind of think about it. You can sort of figure out secrets based on what kind of secret you want to reveal. You can also think about what kind of secrets you want to create based on locations that they're going to, areas that they're currently involved in, major sort of historical or major sort of political things that are going on that are nearby. If you have a game where things are moving from one to the other, you might say, I'm going to have 3 secrets about the first area that they're going to, 3 secrets about the next area they're going to, 4 secrets for the area they're going to last, or whatever, right? Something like that. But I really like your idea that I think each player, each GM can come up with your own prompts that help you. Like write down your own list of the prompts that can help you generate your secrets. Because sometimes you just need to have a list of monster secrets, location secrets, magic item secrets, historical secrets, location, NPC secrets, villain secrets, right? What are those things that help you generate the secrets that you've got? Is a fantastic way to help improve your ability to quickly come up with secrets when you're doing your game prep. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. If you enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. There is a link down in the show notes to do so. It is absolutely free to sign up, and you get a free adventure generator for signing up, and you get a free an article, RPG-related article sent to your inbox every week. You can also support me directly on Patreon. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, adventures, scenarios, toolkits, applications to help you run your games, a whole dedicated podcast, our awesome Sly Flourish Discord community, lots of stuff you get for being a patron of Sly Flourish. And you can pick up any of my books at the Sly Flourish bookstore. Links for those in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.